on Sunday. I could
Okay.
barely go. I maca extract helped me to rally, but I was like, wow. I know, because when I give a session, usually I only give like a healing a day if I'm giving a healing, sometimes
Right.
two. I don't feel exhausted. I don't feel like I gave away my energy. So I was kind of like, that's interesting. Maybe it was just the energetic of the whole room too, you know? I don't
Yeah, there was
know.
some really intense energy in that room throughout.
It was people were just so thirsty and hungry for love and connection and help,
Okay,
you
so
know?
I'm am sharing this on YouTube right now. So if anyone else wants to share it, they can go ahead and do that.
Are you recording yet?
I am not recording, but it is live on YouTube right now. So
Okay. Well, let me find the link and I will begin to share as well. And our theme today is the ethics of energy.
ethical responsibility of the healer. All right. Well, Lisa goes ahead and does that. Let's go ahead and start off by introducing ourselves. Jennifer, you have not been on with us yet during this roundtable series. So why don't you go ahead and start off by introducing yourself, tell people where you're at and what you do.
Hi, my name is Jennifer, and I am a Christian psychic. And I do a lot of work with life coaching and helping people understand their spiritual gifts.
And where are you at? All right, let's go ahead and move on to Cheri. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us where we're at, tell us where you're at.
Okay, my name is Cheri Huss. I'm from Alliance, Nebraska. I do a lot of one-on-one group and online, like psychic mediumship, divination cards, and like a lot of prayer warrior type stuff.
Awesome, welcome. Lisa, why don't you go ahead and let us know who you are, what you do, and where you're at.
Was that directed at me?
Yes.
Just now?
Yes.
Okay. My internet kind of blacked out there for a second. I'm Lisa Betz-Marquez, and I am an energy healer. I work with Reiki, and I do transformational breath work, yoga, meditation, and a breath and movement practice I call archetypal gesture that I have developed and continue to develop, and a number of other tools that I use to work with people to help them uncover and unblock anything standing in their way of being completely authentic and joyful in who they are. So I practice that in Gearing, Nebraska, and I do work on Zoom for anyone interested in reaching out to me.
Thank you, everyone. I'm Michelle. I call myself a spiritual life coach. I help people release the negatives of their past on the emotional level so they can create the positive of their future. And I am right now located in Loveland, Colorado for the next few weeks, and then I'll be traveling. And then, so we're here as a round table. Today we're going to talk about ethical responsibilities of the healer. And this year is a really big topic, I think, for me personally, because I have had actually other healer psychics come up to me during holistic fairs and start reading me without even me giving them permission to read me. And so this year's a really big one for me, and why I constantly make sure that I ask for permission with everyone. So the first question we're just going to bring around is, are you the type that makes sure that everyone has permission when they sit down at your table? Like, do you personally ask for permission? Or I know for me, sometimes if we're talking, I'm telling them what I do. If they say, okay, let's do this, and they sit down, to me, that's them giving me permission. But if they don't ever sit down, that means that they're not giving me permission, and I don't cross that boundary. So Jennifer, how do you deal with getting permission for your practice?
So I love that you guys are talking about this today. And it's so important. I agree with you 100%. It's so funny sometimes when I meet people and they find out that I am psychic, that's one of the things that they do is be like, oh my God, they freak out because they don't want to be read. And I'm like, don't worry, I don't read anybody unless I have complete permission. And I would never look into somebody's energy without them wanting me to. And I know that does happen sometimes. It's happened to me as well. Like I just was having this really weird feeling, and it might have been you, Michelle, but I remember reaching out to a friend going, I feel like somebody's trying to get in my energy. And we found out that I had actually just been at an event and somebody was trying to read my energy and did not have my permission. So it's really interesting. And I think it's such an important topic to talk about. As a healer, most of us have good hearts. Most of us only do the work that we know that we're called to do. And we only work with the people that want to work with us. But I think it's a really big thing to understand that just because you can do this work doesn't mean you have the right to be in everybody's business.
Exactly. Thank you, Jennifer. Lisa, how do you go about getting permission from people? Unmute yourself, please.
I'm a bit similar to you, Michelle. I don't consider myself a psychic. I don't read people's minds. I don't have this ability to tap into what's going on with them unless they are on my table. I do energy healing, right? And so when I put my hands on someone's body, they're giving me permission to do that. And I don't always even share with them what it is that sometimes comes. I'll ask them if they'd like me to share with them what came. But I feel what's going on when I'm doing energy work. Now, I do have experiences where I'll be in a restaurant, for instance, and the server will come up and take our order. And because they're standing so close to my energy field, I can feel the quality, and that's not even the right word, kind of nature, I guess, of their energy. And so I might have an idea that they're having a rough day because their energy feels scattered or spiky, or I guess I don't even know what you call that. And then of course I have abilities through training like NLP to read people's nonverbal cues. And so I find it all very interesting how, as a society where we are at in the 3D world, it's perfectly acceptable to learn how to read people from nonverbal gesture, nonverbal communication, and you can also get a lot from how person's quality of voice is, right? It's okay to do that. Totally fine. But if you have an extrasensory gift, you are not supposed to use that. Or, I understand invasiveness, right? There's like, like what you described, Jennifer, someone's trying to tap in and figure, but I find it interesting how our society views things, right? So it's okay to read people in these 3D ways, but it's not okay to read a person if you have an extra ability. And then I ask the question, I'm just asking more questions than I am weighing in, really. What happens when we all move into telepathic communication? That to me is a fascinating idea, because you then are going to be a complete open book for all people. We're going to know that you're lying. We're going to know that you feel strong or emotional about something. We're going to know that you're fantasizing about someone sexually. So where does that line go? You know, and what's the responsibility we each have as individuals for what we're bringing to the room, to the exchange? So I think in a way I'm kind of lucky that I can't read people's minds and go into their energy field and like, I mean, I don't know what you all do, because I don't do that. I can't do, you have to lay on my table, which is permission as far as I'm concerned, to do the work. But I will say that I've had people come to me and they were real unsure about what they were gonna experience, and I would spend quite a bit of time visiting with them about what it is. And then if I feel funny about it, if I'm like, I don't know if they're really ready or they're really willing to open themselves up to healing, I make them say, I and their name am ready and willing to be healed. I am ready and willing to do the work to be healed. I am open to healing. And I make them say it 3 times. And if they can't say it 3 times, they're off my table and I give them a hug and they're out the door, because they're not ready and I'm not going to waste my time. And I've only had that happen a couple times where people cried so much that they couldn't even speak the words. So that's how I do that. Thanks for the question.
So Cheri, how do you seek permission from your clients?
When I do mediumship, I usually ask them if I have their permission for me to connect to their spirit guides and their ancestors to bring forth that. And I say, I need you to say, yes, you have my permission. And they always do. When it comes to like oracle card readings and things like that, I always assume that since they called me up and they booked the appointment and they're there, that's my permission. You know, it's pretty easy for me, thankfully.
Thank you. So it's interesting because for me, I actually see people's souls. And so I always have to walk that line of, nope, we're not going there today. We're not opening myself up when I'm out in public, because I don't want to know what's going on in their life. I don't want to know what's going on with their soul until they come to me. And so it's really like, I just tell my guides like, nope, I'm going to go shopping. We're closed down. We're not opening it up. And I go and get what I need to do. And then I'm out. And I think that's why when I go shopping, I have my list, I go and get it, and I leave. There's no log-a-dallying, wanting to talk to people in between, because then I can get stuck in opening up, and I don't want that. And so I have my, little list, and I just kind of go and get out. It's really interesting. So when I'm at fairs, it's a little bit harder because I'm so open anyways for people coming into my table that I really have to be careful. Like, nope, we're not going to open up to them until they're sitting in my chair. Once they sit down, then they give me permission to go in and see what's going on. But if they're not sitting down, we're not going to talk to about what I'm seeing. We're just going to talk about what I do. And that way they have an understanding of how it's going to work. So on to the next question. Do you find it inappropriate to send energy to others when they do not ask for it? We're going to go ahead and start with Lisa.
So I love this question. It's probably the one I suggested because I want to know what people think. I wonder sometimes about, Reiki and sending Reiki to people. And there are very strong opinions about this, that you should never give or send Reiki to someone who has not specifically given permission. And so I'm not sure how I feel about that, to be honest with you, because to me, Reiki is simply another form of prayer. And when I teach Reiki to my students, I teach them that that's a strong belief, that you should never send Reiki without permission. But let's just say I'm on an airplane and there's a little baby that's screaming its head off and it's absolutely miserable. And everything the mom or dad does is just making things worse. And there seems to be no real way to calm this child down. Is it wrong for me to send Reiki to the child? I don't think so. My feeling is that, life doesn't always offer you the opportunity to stand there and say, "Hi there, I see that you've fallen out of a building and you're bleeding and you look like you might die. Is it okay for me to give you Reiki now?" Sorry, I'm not going to waste time. I'm going to do what I have to do. So I think that your intention for giving Reiki is more important than anything at all. And I mean, there are people that will get on and say, "Will you please pray for my sister-in-law who just gave birth to a baby that may not make it?" I can pray. It's okay to pray. I think most people agree you can pray for anyone that's needing help. But is Reiki different than that? I don't know. So my answer is, I'm not certain that I am the expert here, but I feel that if your intention is pure, and that you tap in for a minute to this energy of need, maybe you'll get the answer from spirit. And I think that what your purpose and your intent is more important than anything. The other thing about Reiki that I teach is that the person that is receiving the Reiki is in control of how much they receive and how that's used. Like, it's not something you can ever force on anyone. So their soul knows whether they're going to receive it or not. I can't force it on anyone. It has its own intelligence. So there's just all of these little angles about Reiki that I have questions about, that don't always agree. That's how I answer that.
Cheri, how would you go about and answer that question?
I used to be in nursing, and we always had to do CPR certification every couple of years. And in that class, they talked about how if you know CPR, you are supposed to stop and help whoever it is in need. And you can get in trouble for not doing it if they find out, or if I didn't use my nursing abilities in a situation that's an emergency. So for me, I'm taking fire Reiki this summer, and I haven't learned that yet, so I can't really speak to that. But for me, it would be the same thing, because if I know that God's going to use me as another avenue of healing, and I don't do it, and something happens to that person, am I ever going to be able to live with myself? I don't think I could. I would be there in whatever capacity I could be, even if it just means standing there praying over them, and sending that same energy. Because to me, it's prayer is energy, and so either way, I think it's okay if it's a situation like Lisa was talking about, but I don't think, like, I would feel comfortable if I know somebody really hates prayer. I might pray in the direction of that their heart is softened so that they can accept that love and energy eventually. But I don't think I would be able to force it like that either, if that makes sense. Yeah, I think there should be some respect for the other person's wishes there.
I would totally agree. Hey, Jennifer, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm thinking this is going way deeper than I expected. Because I was just expecting it to be like, oh, let's just talk about if you're supposed to do this or not. So this is going in a totally different direction than I expected today. But I'm trying to look something up because it really it's interesting, because there's so many different aspects and avenues, right? Because I'll be honest, like, as a mom, I would have been upset if somebody was sending my kid energy without me knowing. Like, because I want to know who they are and what they're doing and if they have a pure heart. Because just like for me, that's like, it's a good intention. And for everybody on this call, I know you ladies, like, you're doing what's in the best intention of your heart. But what if you are on, I'm going to just play the advocate here of both sides and say, what if that's your belief is that this is, you know, what we would consider dark, and they're sending that energy? I wouldn't want that. So like, I'm looking at this on so many different aspects right now, going, my mind's a little bit overwhelmed, because I thought we were just talking about, like, ethically, what do you do? Well, ethically, you do what you feel is the right thing to do. You have to be discerning in the situation and in the experience. And even like, first of all, I would never do Reiki on anybody that didn't know or didn't ask or wasn't open to receive. Like, even in my group, whenever I'll do Reiki for the group, and I'll just say, it's here when you want it. Like, this is the energy I'm going to send out. If you want it, say yes and comment, right? So then they're giving the permission. The energy is there for them when they want it. That being said, you can also pray for people, but I don't pray, have them accept this energy. I pray, you know, Father God, I ask Jesus and the angels to surround this person in divine compassion and love, and let them see for themselves what they need to do or what they can do, or open themselves up to love, or whatever is in their highest and best interest, not me trying to direct what needs to happen for them. So like, yes, and to everything that was said already, because it is, I mean, we do want to do the best that we can. And if it's an emergency situation, then of course you would, you know, want to help, as most of us that are healers are, right? Like, because that's what we want to do, is we want to help everybody. But then there's also the whole idea of free will. And so if you're offering it as, here it is, if you want it, then I think that's great. You're not overstepping any boundaries. But then the mom thing kicks in, and I'm like, oh, I would be upset if somebody was sending energy to my kid, even though, you know, not because it would be bad or anything, but just because it's my job to protect that little human there. And I'm only going to allow the highest and best divine energy to be around that baby, or, you know what I mean? So like, there's so many different levels and layers, and yeah, different scenarios. And it's definitely a good thing to talk about and to feel into for yourself, like what's right. If you feel that you're being called to pray for somebody or send it for somebody, by all means, but send it with that open invitation of, I'm sending love to you. If that soul is open to it, they can accept it. And if not, no harm done, right? Because you're not trying to interfere with somebody's path, or interfere with their experience, or interfere with their free will.
I would also totally agree. So with Lisa's situation that she had mentioned about the little girl at the airport or airplane, for me, what I usually do is that I just kind of go sit back and go, you know, let's help this little girl out with the best to their highest intention. And that's the wording I use for everything. Even when somebody says, you know, pray, I always go, allow what to happen for their best and highest intentions. Because I don't know what their best and highest intentions are. And you know, if everyone's praying for somebody to, I know this sounds kind of a little bit morbid, but if everyone's praying for somebody to live and it was actually their time to pass on, they may see more trouble and issues by living than just having that instant heartache, that realization that life had ended, and then moving on. So sometimes the best decision is for life to end. Sometimes it's not. And it's not up to me to decide for that person if that's what it is for them. It's up to them and their soul, because only them and their soul knows. So then we're going to go to...
Right. Can I add something really quick,
Yes.
Michelle? Like, as we're sitting here talking about this, I'm like, this comes down to good boundaries. Like, it's all like good boundaries as a human, and then good boundaries with all the woo, all of the energy work, you know?
Yes, truthfully, it's really what is owning those boundaries and knowing when to cross it and when not to cross it. So this next question is really all about boundaries, really, again. What are your feelings on people who just walk up to you at a metaphysical fair or even at a store or whatever and start talking about that they got this reading for you and they have information that they just need to tell you? What are your feelings on that there? Cheri, we'll go ahead and start with you first.
Okay. I've actually had this happen to me. You know, when it happens at church, I'm not normally as taken aback by it because I know the people and I know, I kind of know where they are spiritually more or less. Because I pray with these people actively. But when it happens at like at a fair or somewhere else, I always stop for a minute because I'm always just a little shook because I don't know what they're into. I don't know what their practices are. I don't know where this knowledge is coming from, if it's for good or dark, or you know, light or dark. So I guess I just kind of, it's almost like when people come up and just bleh, here it is without asking permission first. I almost feel like I walk into my house and catch somebody in my underwear drawer. Like, you know, like, oh my God, what are you doing? You know? So I think that's how it makes me feel. It just makes me feel violated and icky. But if there's that question and say, I have this word of knowledge for you, or I have this message from spirit or your whoever, your loved ones, I'm much more receptive to take that because then I know, kind of like what Jennifer said, the good boundaries are there. And it's I think it's a little less intimidating or not intimidating, risky, I guess, to accept it. You know, because you never know what's attached to that message.
Thank you, Cheri. Jennifer, what are your thoughts on this one?
So it's so funny because as you're saying that, like it makes me think of the show like on the TV where they see the mediums and they just go up to him out of the blue or whatever. And I'm like, I really don't know that that's how that happens on TV because I bet my feeling is that she probably does ask for permission. And I don't want to name names, but I think we all know what show we're talking about, where she just like goes up to somebody in a restaurant and whatever. And I'm like, I have a feeling she probably says, you know, I feel like spirit's coming through. Do you want a message? Like, I feel like that's the big thing is since this whole idea of this call is like for ethics, like I think we do have to be ethical about things. And really it does come back to good boundaries. And I feel like it's a violation of your privacy for people to do that. Like, especially depending on what your gift is and what you're seeing or how you're getting information. We have to remember there's an astral plane with all kinds of, I call them the quote unquote nosy neighbors. So you may be getting a reading, but is it coming from Aunt Sue that passed over and decided just to hang out in the astral field and never went on fully to transition? Or is it really directly coming from the highest and best source bringing you through a message? And so it's, again, it's just discernment. I think it's really rude for somebody if you are, that's my personal opinion, is if you are in this profession, it's really rude to go up to somebody and invade their privacy like that because they may not be there for reading. They may be there for the very first time and have never been around any kind of this, you know, the psychic stuff or the woo-woo stuff or the crystals or the energy or the healing or any of it. And maybe they're just there trying to get their feet wet and you just totally ruined it because it just interfered with, again, boundaries. It just interfered with what they were there to experience. So, yeah, I don't like it when people try to get in my energy without asking, and I sure would not ever do it to somebody else. I think it's misrepresented sometimes. I don't know very many people. I don't personally know very many people that would go and do that, but I know it has been done. You know, there's different settings and things where it might be different for that to happen if you kind of know that that's what's happening, you know what I mean? Like I can think of this one Halloween party where it was like that was kind of the thing, like she had hired a medium to come and it was like, so it was kind of a whole different ball game, but that was like everybody was there for that, so it was a different kind of thing, you know what I mean? Whereas if you're just at a show or you're just at a public event or whatever, or if you're just at a restaurant, it's just not, I don't feel like it's appropriate.
Thank you, Jennifer. Lisa, what are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I agree with Jennifer, and I mean all of you really. I don't have too much more to add to that one. I think that it's rude to do that, and it's, I think, a really interesting, like one of the defaults, I guess, is who are you serving with that? Are you serving your will, your ego that I have a message and I want to deliver it? Or are you truly serving the other person's highest good? That's a real good benchmark for me, you know, like, does this really need to be said just because I have the thought or I have, you know, this awareness? Of course, that would never happen to me because I don't get those types of messages. I'm not quite in the same skill set as you guys, but yeah, I think it's rude. It feels like someone exerting their will on someone else, which is always a negative, is always a no-go.
Can I, Michelle, can I do another point? Because I just
Yes.
had this memory. I'm like, oh my God, I remember. So there has been a time where I would have, like, I was at the esthetician but the spirit just it was her grandmother. She kept coming to me and coming to me. And I was like, this is not the time or place. Like, I am not going to do this. I'm not going to do this right now. Like, she doesn't really even know me. And it just kept on and kept on. And so finally, towards the end of the appointment, I said, this is going to sound really, really strange. But I actually am psychic and I feel like I'm getting a message for you. Are you open to that at all? And she was like, oh my God, yes. She said, I would love to hear what it was. Well, she had been waiting to hear from her grandmother. She was like praying to hear from her grandmother. And so this reading came through. So there is things like that happen as well, but it's, you know, I handled it in a totally different way. I didn't just say, I have a message for you. I was like, this is what's happening. I have this spirit's coming through. Like, are you open? So it was totally different. But in that case, you know, spirit was very impressing on me that I needed to say something. So finally I was like, okay, I will say something at the end of the appointment. And I did. And so then there's things like that as well. But I always would ask for permission first. I would never just say, hey, your grandma's here.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So it was really interesting that about 3 years ago, I was doing a holistic fair. And this guy comes up, and he's always around during this one holistic fair. And he just comes up to me, goes, can I sit down at your table? And I'm like going, sure. And he starts telling me how, like, I'm not made for this position. I'm not supposed to be doing this. I'm not. And I was like going, wait a minute here. You're definitely not reading me. And he was just going off, and it took him like 45 minutes to get all this stuff out. And I was like, first of all, I never asked for your permission. Second of all, remember, if it causes drama, it's from the dark. And I was like, why did you feel like you needed to tell me all this? And he goes, well, I've been told to. And I was like, interesting. And just kind of blew it off for the day and went home and, you know, did my meditation. And I was like going, wow, I really wonder if that was back then, them trying to stop me from doing what I do because of how light I am. So therefore, we need to also check to make sure that our messages are coming from the light. And that's why those boundaries are so very important. Okay, so now we're going to get to Lisa's question that she posed earlier about what boundaries around the telepathic communications do we have once that starts to really open up and happening for people. Because I know I've had telepathic communications with both my kids at night. We have conversations all the time, but I only have them with my kids. So Lisa, since you asked this question earlier, how would you pose those boundaries around all that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I asked the question because I don't know. You know what I mean? And I'm not telepathic myself, although I have had, so years ago when I was about 29, I think, this guy I dated briefly just stopped calling me, and I was kind of ticked off about it. I felt like it was really rude. And so when I went to bed that night, I imagined myself getting in my car, driving to his apartment, walking into his building and into the door and everything. I just like went through the door, and I remember seeing the pattern on the flooring into his building. And I walked in and I found him in his bed and I said, "Call me." And I never had done anything like that before, and never have since. But I was learning how to do different things. I was going to a metaphysical church, and I was learning how to do mediumship. And so there were these things I was sort of learning. And I got a phone call the very next day. And he even said, "I don't know why I'm calling you. I just felt compelled to call you, like I had to call you." And he said, "Would you like to meet and talk or something?" And I was like, yeah. And then of course he was like wanting to meet me at like some ridiculous time in the morning, like 5 a.m. And, it had to be over by his gym. And this was in DC, where, it was just not convenient at all. It was just all these like hurdles to get to this meeting. And so I said, okay. And then I thought about it later, and I was like, I'm not going to go do all that stuff. And so I called and left a message, and I basically told him on the phone what I wanted to say, which was, "I think you've treated me poorly and I don't like it. And I just wanted you to know that. And no, I don't need to meet you because you're a jerk." And I hung up. And so I'm telling the story because that isn't exactly telepathic. It is telepathic. I don't know what you call that, but I have come to believe that was wrong of me to do, that was manipulating somebody, and my will was being exerted on that person. And just because you can doesn't mean you should, right? Mm-hmm. And so I feel kind of ashamed of the fact that I did that. And yet at the same time, I learned that I could do something like that. Like it sort of taught me that the world of life and spirit and our abilities as humans is much bigger in terms of spectrum than I ever imagined. I mean, this was way, way back in like probably 1999 this happened. And so this was way in 3D world, So I think that as we begin to be telepathic as humans, which I believe is the next progression of our form of communicating. I think as people raise up and ascend, their vibration is going to bring them to a point where telepathy will be the way we communicate. And we will have to learn how, as humans, to control our minds, control our feelings. And because if everybody can see plain as day what's in your mind, in your heart, they know you're a liar. They know that you're, greedy. They know that you're, having malintent, if you are, whatever. So you're going to be easily spotted by everybody who's telepathic around you, right? If this is how we're all, but it's going to take us a while as humans to come online to telepathy. So there is this sort of strange gray area of, is it, if you're hearing a person's words or thoughts, is it your fault that you're hearing their thoughts because you're telepathic? Like what I see the progression as is, you folks who have the skill to go in and see or hear or whatever, that's like intentional that you have to do that. But I'm like thinking we're going to get to a point where this is the default, just like speech, like everybody can kind of do it. When you hit a certain vibration, we're all going to get to a point where we are just communicating that way. And words will be like verbal speech will be some kind of cuneiform where they're like, well, Shakespeare, that was way back in the 3D world, but it's still beautiful to observe. Do you know what I mean? I mean, that's just my theory. I don't know anything, but that's So I don't believe that you have the right to manipulate people. If you can go in and put thoughts in their mind or command them to do something. Although I don't believe I forced the guy to do the call. He chose to call, even though he didn't know why. I still don't think what I did was quite ethical at the time.
Jennifer, what are your thoughts?
Well, just going on what she was saying, she's like, you're saying that you don't do telepathy or you don't understand it, but you also just said if you're at a restaurant, the waiter's having a bad day, you feel it. It's the same kind of thing. It's just a different understanding. So being empathic and being telepathic are very, very closely related. So, but again, just because you felt that he was having a bad day, you're not going to announce to the table he's had a really shitty day. You know what I mean? You're gonna be like, you might try to make him smile, or you might give him a better tip, or whatever, but you're not. It's the same thing with telepathy. Just because I'm going down the grocery store and I realize that person's really upset, I'm not going to go up to her and say, it'd be just the same as a reading of a spirit coming through. I'm not going to go up to her and say, look, I really know you're upset. And it's an invasion of privacy. So whether it's telepathic or empathic or spirit or intuition or clairvoyance or however you're getting it, those are all very similar in the way they work. So again, it just comes back to, just because you can doesn't mean you should. And just because you're hearing it or seeing it or feeling it doesn't mean that you project it out or announce it for everyone. And I think it's going to be the same thing. And as far as we raise vibration into 5D, there's not the people that understand and raise into the 5D vibration, they'll have already filtered out those 3D negativity thoughts and feelings and emotions. So that's why it won't be the same. It won't even be an issue because when you're in that environment, when you're in that 5D energy, there is no space for those lower vibrations. There's no space for the lower, lack thoughts, less than thoughts, negative thoughts, whatever you want to call it. So when you move into that, that's why as you move into 5D, why people are more telepathic, because we are all resonating very similarly and the empath abilities become stronger. So.
Totally agree. Cheri, what are your thoughts?
I agree with Jennifer 100%. When you're in that realm, you just don't even have the negative stuff or the dark energy. I didn't realize this. I guess I didn't really think of it that way until today. But when I do mediumship, when ancestors and spirit energy comes through, their mouth doesn't move. Like, I'm having this whole conversation in my head with them, and I'm relaying messages that are, completely creepily accurate because I don't know this person sitting in front of me and the memories and all these things, right? And a few times I set boundaries so that I'm very protected with angelic presence and that sort of thing. So I don't usually have bad stuff come through anyway. But if I have a message that comes through that I feel like could be hurtful or freak them out a little bit, I always get permission from them if they want to hear it, and usually they do. And it's usually something very, very important to them to heal. So I think what Jennifer says is 100% true. You don't have that negative space. I also have had situations where an old boyfriend from high school, about once or every 2 years, comes to me somehow in the dream space. And thinking about it, we don't even really, our mouths don't move when we're talking, but I wake up and I know it was a visit somehow. And it's not anything like, my husband is like the best husband in the whole world. It's not like a bad thing. It's an energetic, something is wrong and he is hurting. And for some reason, I'm the person that he just kind of shows up to, and I don't know why. And astral travel is the same way. I have people that astral travel usually the astral traveling, a lot of people do that at night without even knowing it. I don't think their mouths move when they talk. It's telepathic communication. So I don't think it's going to be a concern so much as we think it is. Like, that's our flesh thinking. It's not our spirit thinking. if we think it's going to be negative and everyone's going to, we're going to be exposed. I don't think spirit would do that to us.
I would have to like completely agree that I don't think spirit is going to totally expose all of us for everything. And that when we are in that space, we are going to be up more in that 5D, that loving companion. I know when I'm talking to spirit, I'm talking to them through their heart space. So our mouths are not moving. We're feeling each other's emotions and then putting words to it as we have this long conversation. And I really think that by the time everyone gets up to that point, we're going to have, at least saying, more control over our mind, to where we're going to be able to have those boundaries a lot more, to go, I don't want to be open today. I'm just going to be in that loving 5D space, but not be open. And then we can go about life going that way too, just allowing, but not being open to that telepathic communication. It's just all about boundaries. I think that's what it really just comes down to, is everything comes down to boundaries. So we're coming to the end of our hour. I want to say thank you to everyone who has joined us today. Would you go ahead and give yourselves a little shout out again about where you're at and how people can go get a hold of you? Jennifer, why don't you go ahead and start?
Okay, so the best place probably to find me is on my website. It's just jenniferlonnberg.com. And then on Facebook, I have a community group called Embodied Grace Community. And I also have a Facebook page there too. So you can find the group through my Facebook page, which again is just my name. So.
Thank you. Lisa, why don't you go ahead and start? Why don't you go ahead and go?
I'm Lisa Betz-Marquez, and you can find me at prairieartsyoga.com. And there is information about all kind of work that I do. And you can even book a session with me through the portal there. So thank you.
Cheri, why don't you go ahead and put out your information?
Okay. Cheri Huss, and right now I'm working on getting a website, but I'm on a Facebook group called Spirit Closure with Cheri. And usually, if you PM me through Messenger, I respond pretty quickly. So that's usually how people find me.
And I'm Michelle. People find me on my website with healingwithmichelleadams.com. I'm also on Facebook with Healing with Michelle Adams. And you can also just find me on my regular Facebook page as Michelle Adams. And it was great talking to all of you wonderful ladies today. We truly enjoy our roundtable sessions that we do.